Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Ronna, and I'm sure all of you, whether you've watched them or not, have been very aware of the presidential debates that have been going on over the last several months that have gone along with the primaries in the Republican and Democratic parties. So tonight's guest is Scott Deshefy. Scott ran for Congress on the Green Party ticket twice, in 2008 and 2010. And I thought it would be interesting to, since we don't have Green Party folks in these presidential debates, to talk about some national issues that have come up in the debates or that have been neglected in the debates, and put a green slant on them. So thanks for coming on, Scott.
Thank you. So I guess I'm surrogate presidential candidate for the night then.
I guess so.
Okay, that's good.
We could do worse.
Thank you.
And some people might know that you write a column about twice a month in the Norwich Bulletin.
Actually, every week.
Oh, it's every week?
Every Saturday.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I just finished this afternoon, the one that's due tomorrow, so I'll be emailing that out to the editor tomorrow. Or tonight, probably.
So I guess I wanted to start by just getting your view of how this presidential campaign is going and what lessons there are to be learned.
The first lesson that should be learned is that the two-party system doesn't work because of the quality of the candidates that we have. Certainly the conservative side of things. Kasich is a pretty down-to-earth moderate conservative in my view, and seems to be a pretty good guy. Donald Trump, I think, is getting justifiable backlash not only from the GOP but from the media. And Ted Cruz may be even more dangerous, at least in my view, than
I think his
Mr.
views
Trump.
are more dangerous
I think so too.
Than Trump's. The difference might be that he's not well liked and people might not tend to follow him as much as they might follow Trump.
Well, Trump, what happens in our electoral system now is that it's about celebrity. And it's not really about the issues. And Donald Trump, to his credit, knows about milking celebrity. And the media love it because they're making a lot of profits with all of the Trump coverage. People are tuning into the news to see what ridiculous thing, an outrageous thing he said, misogynist thing, xenophobic thing he said today. And
not to mention the violence that's broken out at his rallies.
That's right, which a lot of his verbiage has encouraged, or at least set the stage for that type of thing. There's a petition out for the Republican convention. Ohio is an open carry gun state, and the arena that is going to hold a Republican convention in Cleveland has a strict policy against anybody bringing guns into the arena, which of course makes a lot of sense. So someone has put together a petition online to enable Republicans to carry openly firearms to the Republican convention. Now, can you imagine that? Because they're going to be, especially if it's undecided, and an open convention to choose who their nominee is going to be, the heated tempers and temperaments that might override good sense, and then have people carrying firearms to this thing. So it shows how ridiculous this whole process has become. But to Trump's credit, there are a lot of things that he has espoused, other than his xenophobia and misogyny and just stupid comments, that are liberal and progressive. He recognizes the value of a single-payer Medicare for all health system. He has investments in Scotland and elsewhere around the world. He travels around the world. He's seen that it works in other industrial countries and would work very well here in the United States, and we should have it. And as you know, when I ran for Congress, that was part of my platform as well. He also sees the value and need for the wealthy, whether you're talking about corporate oligarchs or plutocrats in this country, to pay more in taxes. to stop the inversions where a lot of corporations are going overseas to
Right,
avoid
it's become a local issue because Pfizer is in process.
Exactly, and it's costing the United States tens of billions of dollars, if not a trillion, more than $1 trillion over a short period of time in terms of corporate taxes that we're losing. That means more taxation on our backs as taxpayers here in the United States because we don't have that inversion loophole. Also, he is very lukewarm or against a lot of these so-called free trade agreements like NAFTA, which has been a disaster, which is supported by Ms. Clinton as it was originally started in her husband's administration,
Right.
and also the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which sends American jobs or will send American jobs overseas. In case of the TPP, it creates a trade deficit here in the United States, and it's been described as an insurgence by corporate America, basically a corporate coup d'etat.
Yeah, my understanding is that under the TPP, companies could sue governments that made regulations, environmental regulations, or human rights regulations that cut into their profits.
Yeah, it's a little bit like food disparagement.
Yeah.
Some of the viewers may recall that in one of the talk shows, I'm trying to think of who it was now, but a gentleman who wrote Mad Cow, a former cattle rancher, came on this program and said that he didn't eat beef anymore, and he encouraged the audience, both the viewing audience at home and in the studio, to stop eating beef as well because of the ecological, ethical, and health implications. And there was a lawsuit brought as a result of that for food disparagement. Well, it's the same type of thing. You could call
Right.
it reduction of profits either way,
Right.
where something for the common good is suggested, and as a result, they could sue anybody who advocated for environmental protection. So it's ridiculous. But so Trump has in fact some good points to make, and that's the GOP side of things. If you look on the Democratic side, of course, Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat; he's an independent, and it's important to make that clear. But the reason that he's getting any press attention at all, he's getting much less than either Mr. Trump or Secretary Clinton, is because he's running in the Democratic primary.
Right.
And I'm a supporter of two people, Bernie Sanders and also Jill Stein, who is the Green
Right.
Party candidate. They're both liberals and progressives, however you want to describe them. Secretary Clinton is not. She's very conservative. She's hawkish. She's pretty much owned by the establishment, whether you're talking about the Wall Street establishment, where she has speaking engagements for hundreds of thousands of dollars a pop, or corporate America, or the wealthy, who are the primary contributors to her campaign. Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, has grassroots support. He's bringing in $20, $25 donations from tens of thousands of people. And all that fundraising has enabled him to continue the campaign. Right now he's on quite a surge because he's winning not so much a lot of delegates, because a lot of the states he's winning are caucus states, but he's won 6 of the last 7 primaries, whether you're
Right.
talking about caucuses or primaries. And he is ascendant. Ms. Clinton right now is in a bit of a decline. If Bernie Sanders can win California, New York, and Wisconsin, he has a shot to pull this off. And this is a progressive, liberal movement. It's very important, and frankly, I don't understand why everybody isn't supporting Bernie Sanders, because he's for tuition-free education. He's for single-payer Medicare for all health care. He's for the rich paying their fair share, and corporate America paying for their fair share in taxes. And and also advocating a lot of other things that progressives such as you and I, the Green Party, have been advocating for many years. Ralph Nader, more
His
than a decade ago.
domestic policy is very closely aligned with the Greens. I'd
It
say
is.
on foreign policy, he's not there yet.
No.
But when it comes to domestic policy, he's pretty close.
Yeah, and even in foreign policy, he sees the sense of the Middle East countries really shouldering the responsibility for controlling the radical Islamic State. And that's asking a lot because of the differences between Saudi Arabia and Iran and some of the other players in the Middle East. But if they could put those differences aside and become the anti-IS Islamic State coalition in that area, then we could withdraw, hopefully, our military intervention there. And our military intervention is a big reason why we have these groups that are causing so much violence, such as the bombing in Brussels most recently, and the attack in the Punjab area of Pakistan just a few days ago.
Now, getting back to, I guess, more domestic issues, I think one of the motivating factors for many people being involved and emotional about this year's election is that the economy is not working for a lot of people. More and more we've been seeing corporate privilege playing out in terms of, policies that make money for the banks and, for big companies and kind of leave the workers out in the cold. So what would you say we should be looking at in terms of making our economy work for everyone?
Well, first of all, we have to come to an agreement about reality, and that is that the 1% is in fact concentrating more and more wealth in their hands. And that's to the detriment of the middle class and to the poor. The middle class is shrinking. It's harder and harder for people to get by. And what's happening in the 1% is that all of that wealth, accumulated wealth, is not only concentrating in that upper echelon, economic echelon, but it's also becoming capital wealth that is heritable. That is, they pay little or no taxes on it. I mean, our capital might be our homes, where we are paying property taxes. They may be paying property taxes on their homes as well, or mansions as the case may be, but then they have investments in Wall Street and elsewhere where they're not paying taxes. And all that capital wealth is then transferred to the next generation. Taxes aren't paid on it. Meanwhile, it's not being distributed to the middle class. They're not, economists used to say, and probably still say, that the best thing is for money to circulate around the country. And when money is being invested in capital investments in the 1% economic class and not being circulated, then that's bad for the economy. So we can invest more heavily in alternative energy jobs, because for every dollar spent there, you create more jobs than dollars spent in the fossil fuel industry. That's been proven time and time again. The solar industry is really taking off and becoming cost competitive with all other types of energy in the southwestern United States and western United States in particular. So that's one investment we need to make. We need to make investments in infrastructure, whether it's through government investment or through private investment. Government probably being the better of the two, because we know about the lead problem in Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan is just the canary in the mine shaft.
Yeah, we're
right
hearing now that there are a lot of places where the same thing is happening.
Every major urban area has the same problem in all likelihood. And why did they have the problem in Flint, Michigan? It's because General Motors had a plant there. They dumped chemicals into the two rivers that meet at Flint, Michigan. And as a result, when that water was then sent through the taps the corrosive chemicals which are still in that water decades after General Motors left Flint, Michigan after declaring bankruptcy, corroded the pipes and took the lead out of the piping and soldering and
So
into
the water
drinking
had both the corrosive chemicals plus lead and probably cadmium and other
Absolutely.
acid-soluble things that were in the pipes.
Yeah, a lot of the heavy metals leached out because of the corrosives in the new sources of water that were sent through the pipes by the Flint administration. So we have problems with our highways, we have problems with our sewage systems, we have problems with our water distribution systems. All of these things need to be rectified. It's going to cost trillions of dollars. So we need to use that to our advantage to create jobs, much like the jobs that FDR created back in the 1930s during the Depression era. So that would enable the middle class to get back on its feet. We also have to do something about debt because healthcare is a problem. Even if you have private insurance, the likelihood of a private insurer covering all your costs if you have a serious illness is zero, basically. You're going to have some type of deductible. A lot of these deductibles and co-pays are breaking households and causing personal bankruptcy. And also the cost of education. Tuition-free education can be paid for through tariffs, again, to go back to the free trade agreements. Well, we really need to level the playing field for American jobs and American companies with foreign companies, is to use some of the tariffs that were used prior to the income tax. That's how we paid for infrastructure improvements in the United States back in the 19th century, up until the income tax in the early 20th century. And we need to reduce our military spending, spend some of that money back here in the United States, infrastructure repair as an example, and to create jobs. We need to reduce the cost of education. We can use 0.5% transaction fees on Wall Street, something that I advocated, Ralph Nader advocated over a decade ago.
It seems as though in addition to raising funds that could possibly have an effect on people's behavior a little, and we might see a little less speculation.
Yeah, I mean, I believe, and Senator Sanders has also said this, and I believe Jill Stein suggests as well, that we should bring back Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall separated investment banking from commercial banking so that the people that were playing the Wall Street casino game, the investment bankers, could not take commercial money, the depositors' money basically, and gamble on Wall Street transactions with that money. That's what got us into the big problem in 2008, where we had to bail out the banks too big to fail.
Or we chose to bail them
Or we
out.
chose to-
Iceland
right.
chose to bail out the people, not the banks.
That's right. That's right. And we need to break up those banks. They can set limits at holdings of maybe $4 or $5 billion, I've heard thrown about. Right now, the banks actually hold more money, control more money than they did in 2008. So Dodd-Frank has not been effective. It really doesn't have much in the way of enforcement teeth. So we need to bring back Glass-Steagall or something like that, and that will help us break up the big banks ultimately.
Now, is there any will in Congress to do this, to bring back Glass-Steagall?
No, other than
Like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders?
Well, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, yes.
Yeah, and that's about it.
And Elizabeth Warren has been a big champion of this, and Senator Sanders also. But other than that, there really isn't much support for it. Why? Because Wall Street and the big banks are contributing to campaigns, and therefore we need campaign finance reforms. And as long as we have Citizens United and and some of these other umbrellas protecting these big investors, they're going to send huge amounts of money to Democrats and Republicans both. Now, you and I know that Green Party candidates,
Right.
such as when I ran in Congress, we don't accept PAC money, we
Right.
don't accept corporate donations. Senator Sanders, to his great credit, has had the courage not to accept PAC money and corporate donations as well, and of course Jill Stein, who's running as
Right.
the Green Party candidate. And that does take a lot of courage, because you're going up against, in the case of Senator Sanders, against Hillary Clinton, who's bringing in hundreds of billions of dollars, or
Right.
hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of donations from the very rich and the establishment, well-heeled establishment.
I think people are starting to see through it a little bit, though.
They are. The question is whether enough people are or not. And some people just don't care. Once they support a candidate, they don't care about the shortcomings. And the Clinton name is recognizable. I'm frankly surprised that a lot of minority support is behind Hillary Clinton, because in the 1990s, when President Bill Clinton was elected, he had a lot of minority support, particularly from the southern United States. And of course, he had been governor of Arkansas, so you can understand that to some
Right.
degree. But then when he got in office, in I think it was 1994, he passed a criminal bill, which was, I think, the Three Strikes You're Out bill, which was to a disadvantage of a lot of
Yeah.
minority groups.
And that's, I think, when the United States became the incarceration
That's right.
leader of the world.
That's right. And also, during the Clinton administration, there were welfare reforms which reduced the period of welfare checks, and again, that mostly affected lower economic echelons, and the poor and lower middle class are disproportionately represented among minority groups as opposed to whites. So nobody seems to realize that, and granted, Bill Clinton was Hillary Clinton's husband, but she has taken credit publicly for working with Bill Clinton on those particular bills, particularly the 1994 crime bill. So somebody should hold their feet to the fire a little bit about that. Senator Sanders is very polite in the debates. He brings up the money that she's receiving from wealthy contributors, and I don't believe he has actually brought that home during the debate process.
Although I've started to read recently that the Clintons doesn't really have as much of a lead on minority voters as the media is portraying. So it's so hard to know, especially if we get our news from the mainstream media. I saw what Rolling Stone, Jan Wenner, just endorsed Hillary Clinton, and then I thought, Rolling Stone, I would think they'd be progressive, and he's worth like $700 million. So you have to start seeing it through the lens of, oh yeah, these people have a personal stake in things staying kind of the way they are.
If it's corporate media, they don't want a Bernie Sanders or Jill Stein elected. We know how third-party candidates get marginalized.
We sure do.
I know that from experience twice over. And the reason is that we want corporate America to pay their fair share in taxes and not control the government, which is what they do right now. Disproportionately, Trump and Ms. Clinton have gotten most of the television time in the corporate media, and that's because those media have their own agenda. Those are the people, the establishment people that they want to get elected, or they make a lot of money in the case of Trump by airing his views and then rehashing them and arguing why he said the things that he said. Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, has not gotten nearly as much television time, and there's very little attention to the actual issues. Has anybody talked about tuition-free college and how it's going to be paid for? No. They say, well, it's free tuition, and then they put that out there as if it's unrealistic. It isn't. It's something that can be very easily paid for. It's being done in Europe.
And I wanted to ask you about that. So much of what Sanders is proposing in terms of things like universal health care and free tuition and infrastructure repair is being dubbed free stuff.
So it isn't free. We can pay for it by reducing our gluttonous military spending. Why are we paying for the German defense security? Why are we paying for South Korea? They're both very vibrant economies right now, so they can pay for their own military. We're paying for that, plus we're paying for what is now basically a mercenary armed forces. Ever since the dissolution of the draft, and I'm not against the dissolution of the draft, I think it was one of the good things that Richard Nixon did during his administration. But since then, we have a volunteer army, but more and more, because it is a volunteer army, it's being used like a mercenary military. We don't have to declare war anymore. Congress is not involved in the deployment of these people. It's our commander-in-chief, basically by executive action, or you could call the presidency right now assassin-in-chief, because we're sending drones out and killing people in faraway countries where we haven't declared war. All of that costs hundreds of billions of dollars. We have close to 1,000 military bases in over, I think, 130 countries. And when I was running for Congress, I analyzed what that cost the average taxpayer. Is about $8,000 in federal taxes on average per taxpayer in the United States, if you figured the budget about $800 billion and about 100 million taxpayers. And that's absurd. It's the largest military in the world. Nobody comes close, not China, not Russia, nobody. So we can reduce it by 50% or more very easily.
And starting out by closing so many of the bases abroad and getting rid of some of the hard. I was just reading about a plane that's $1 trillion plane that. A lot of people could go to college for that $1 trillion. Of course,
and our submarines built here in Groton are $2 to $2.5 billion per sub. So, and that's basically a welfare system where the taxpayers are paying for the military industrial complex jobs that are created with each of these federal contracts. Then when the contracts are up, the people are laid off. Then if there's a new contract, then they're rehired. But it would be better if we have sustainable jobs that are beneficial not to corporate America, because these subs are protecting to a large degree corporate investments overseas, these multinational corporations. Not you and I. I mean, what are they doing in terms of national security and preventing a militant from coming to the United States with a Uzi and opening fire in a movie theater? Nothing. All right, so we need to really think about that critically and reduce military spending as much as we can realistically.
And I think that the corporate heads are pretty explicit about it. I remember in the late 80s, after there were huge layoffs at EB after the surge during the Reagan years, and there was at that time a lot of talk of figuring out how to diversify or repurpose that facility where there were a lot of skilled workers. And the CEO said something like, we're so used to cost plus manufacturing, we couldn't compete in a free marketplace.
Yeah, and that's why it's a welfare system basically. that we as taxpayers are supporting. When I ran for Congress, I guess it was the second time in 2010, I got a call from the BBC News, which was directed to me by Ray Hackett of the Norwich Bulletin. And they were interested in my candidacy because I was talking about converting the military jobs into jobs that were for the common good, building mass transit as an example, or research vessels, or any number of things that could be done at Electric
Right.
Boat through a conversion process that would be sustainable jobs that would be there year in and year out, and that would be competitive on the marketplace so that we as taxpayers wouldn't have to support those jobs. And they were very interested because it's exactly what the UK was trying to do. To the best of my knowledge, there have been, and I think there may have been some Green candidates behind this, there have been major reductions in military spending at the UK.
Now, interestingly, the discussion of the economy kind of covered a lot of issues that I sort of had included in things like human rights, like education and healthcare. But one issue that's kind of been big this year is immigration.
Mm-hmm.
I know Donald Trump talks about having the Mexicans pay for us to build a big wall, and I don't know if it was a satire or not, but I heard the same proposed for Canada. That might have been a humor column. But so what's your view on immigration?
Well, Canada already has some walls. If you've ever been to Montreal or Quebec City,
Yeah.
there are walls built there to keep the Americans out. This was during the French and Indian War and the American Revolution, because our first invasion as a country, or fledgling country, I should say, was by Benedict Arnold when he invaded Canada during the American Revolution. So those walls were built to keep
and then
Americans
he turned around
out.
and
Yeah.
invaded New London.
Yeah. Of course, it's ridiculous. The Mexican government's not going to fund. The reason that we have so many Mexican immigrants is because of NAFTA. NAFTA pushed cheap corn on small local farmers in Mexico. Those small farms went kaput, they went under, and as a result, the farmers needing work came north, migrated north looking for work. So that was one of the drawbacks of the North American Free Trade Agreement. Not to mention the fact that the corn was genetically modified corn, so you're reducing the great diversity of maize in Mexico, which is where it was grown, and the Aztecs
Right.
developed an extraordinary culture around the corn growing in that diversity. Immigration is a natural process. Yes, there should be a short route to people getting a green card if they just want to come to the United States to work and then go back to Mexico. There should be an expedited way to get citizenship here in the United States. Putting up walls or so restricting migration that it's next to impossible for people to come to the United States hurts us as a country. It hurts us in terms of cultural diversity. It hurts us in terms of filling jobs. It even hurts us in terms of wages and establishing a living wage for everybody here in this country, because so many people can be hired as undocumented workers for very, very low pay.
And they really have no way to assert their rights.
They have no way to assert their rights if they're living in a shadow culture, trying to avoid detection by the United States government, where they might be deported. Not that that is a realistic venture either. I know that Mr. Trump and I guess some of the other conservative candidates have suggested deporting literally millions of people that are now, even if they don't have full citizenship, have been in the country contributing, paying taxes, and a major part and necessary part of the workforce here in the United States. You know, you're talking about education and healthcare, and very quickly what comes to mind is the fact that the costs of both of these things are going up. Pharmaceutical drugs, because big pharma and our educational system, our colleges, will charge whatever the market will allow. Now, if you're taking a drug that is critical to your survival, if you have a very serious illness and you need that drug, you're going to pay whatever the cost may be. If you have to put a second mortgage on your house, if you have to have a reverse mortgage on your house, sell all your belongings, basically go bankrupt in order to get that pharmaceutical, you're going to do that. Unfortunately, we're in much the same situation in terms of our education. If you don't have a college degree these days, it's not like the old days where you could work in a blue-collar job and work up through the ranks and through a merit process, get a higher paying job with a pension. The pensions are deteriorating because our unions are deteriorating here in the United States. Benefits are deteriorating. So in order to get a good paying job, possibly with some type of benefits or to make enough money where you can hopefully save some money for retirement, you have to have that degree. And therefore, the cost of that degree keeps going up and up and up and up, even though most of the professors now at UConn and other colleges are not full-time professors. They're part-time
and the
lecturers.
adjuncts are really making poverty wages.
Yeah, absolutely. The adjuncts don't have any benefits. They may be working for the state, but because they're part-time employees, technically, they're not getting any of the state sick leave, retirement benefits, and that type of thing, or health care benefits. And I was an adjunct professor in the community college system, and I enjoyed it very much. But I also had a full-time job during the day. So I was teaching courses in environmental science, general biology, astronomy at night. And I was doing it for my own edification because I enjoy teaching, particularly those subjects. But I know what is being paid. At that time, it was years ago, I was being paid, I think, about $25 an hour. All right, which is a living wage if you've got 30 or 40 hours of it, but if you've got 3 to 5 hours a week, it's not. So that's why the costs keep going up. What's happening in Europe is they're providing all these incentives for college students to work on degrees in Europe. In Germany, if you're an engineering student, in most cases, you're going to get your tuition paid for. I mean, European kids get it's tuition free anyway. And they have some of the best schools. Finland has, again, I think was ranked #1 as having the best school system in the world. So what's happening is thousands of students, my own daughter included, are going to school in Europe now because it's much less expensive. It's about the cost of community college in terms of tuition. And they have expedited programs now in English where you can get a bachelor's degree in 2.5 years at some of these universities. So that's what we should be doing here. We should be providing incentives for kids to go to college, to advance themselves, to learn whatever it is they want to learn. And if there are some things that we need, if we need more engineers, if we need more mathematicians, we need more scientists, then while we should have tuition-free college altogether, at least we can start there and providing tuition-free college for those areas to support our needs here in the United States.
Now, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about environmental issues. Some of what we can be facing in the coming years and decades are really things that we're all in together, so they could be unifying topics, but they're really often polarizing topics. What would you say are the big environmental challenges we're facing, and what should we be doing?
Well, global warming, of course, is the gorilla in the room always, and it's less polarizing now because I've been working for years on a book on environmental ethics, and I've got a chapter on global warming that's about 70 pages long. It's a book within a book. And I can't keep up with the data that keep coming in to support global warming. It is a scientific fact. And the scientific community, by consensus, overwhelming consensus, supports that as fact. So what do we do to mitigate the problem? Well, we've got the Parisian environmental meetings and a lot of the commitments that are being made by the United States, China, other countries. All that is well and good. What had been brought to the table in those discussions by the United States is that we're reducing our carbon emissions. And that's what EPA had suggested with their data. Lo and behold, we may not be reducing our carbon emissions, at least not as much as was previously thought. In fact, we may actually be increasing our emissions. And the reason is methane. In the discussion of greenhouse gas emissions, most of the discussion is about carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide lasts 100 to 200 years, the CO2 molecules. Methane lasts about 20, but methane is also over 20 times more potent as a greenhouse gas emission. We all know that it comes from livestock waste and other sources, which is a good reason, again, for us to get away from the factory farming and the feedlots and become more vegetarian as a nation, et cetera. What wasn't really appreciated is how much methane is coming out of fracking through natural gas wells. These wells are sealed, at least they're supposed to be, with bentonite or some other type of a concrete mixture that's usually used to seal wells, but then it contracts. And it was thought that there might be some incidental methane emissions coming out of this that we'd have to keep an eye on. Bill McKibben, who writes a great deal about global warming and has been one of the champions to mitigate global warming for many years now, has referenced two Cornell scientists who years ago said, we've got to look at these methane emissions. They may be much more substantive than significant than we had thought. EPA had done some tests and came out with a conclusion that, no, it's not a big deal. There might be some incidental methane emissions from fracking, et cetera. But I think that was more politically motivated than by hard science. Other scientists have supported the Cornell scientists very recently. EPA was forced to go back and look at data, collect more data, and have found out, in fact, with the help of NASA, that these methane emissions coming out of these fracking wells and other natural gas wells are very significant indeed, and are a big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a crisis, really, that we need to deal with right now.
And it seems as though over the last 5 to 10 years, people have been very much encouraged to switch to natural gas, and now that's not the answer either. No,
Governor Malloy has used it as a bridge energy, I think is the terminology that's been used, and it does have 50% less CO2 emissions than coal and fuel oil that's burnt, right, for heating or whatever the purpose might be, electrical generation. When I ran for Congress, T. Boone Pickens at that time was advocating for wind energy and a corridor of wind turbines in the southern, midwestern, western United States. And he also advocated for the use of diesel fuel in vehicles, which is more efficient than gasoline. And at that time, and I stated in the debates with Joe Courtney and the Republican candidates that we should look at natural gas as a segue, but not get wedded to it. We can't automatically flip a switch from fossil fuels to alternative clean fuels such as solar or geothermal wind. But we can't get wedded to that bridge, if you will. And we have, because the explanation has been, well, it's 50% less CO2 emissions, so let's go great guns into natural gas. And we know about the fracking and the movie Gasland,
Gasland.
where a farmer in Pennsylvania, I think it was.
I think so.
Yeah, turned on the tap when the movie
Yeah.
was made and lit the water coming out of it because of the high methane emissions. It burned.
It's pretty scary. The good
Very
news
scary.
is that solar is rising. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission
Yeah.
here, and it seems as though every month we get a report, and there are a lot of people putting panels on their roofs. Well, we're down to about 3 minutes. Maybe some people would say 2. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, unless there's something we really missed content-wise, about what it's like to run as a third-party candidate, because I have petitions for the Green Party candidate. Jill Stein is on this petition. She's not officially the Green Party candidate. I think the convention is early August, so nothing will be official till then, but she is certainly the individual who has been organizing the presidential race really over the last 4 years since she ran in 2012. And the petition effort, in a way, is easier than what you did in 2008, when you had to get about 4,000 raw signatures from Eastern Connecticut, mostly by yourself. But we need to get 7,500 valid signatures statewide. So I would say that's 12 to 15,000 raw signatures. So I guess if there is anyone who's watching this who wants to collect 25, 50 signatures from your friends, family, neighbors, get in touch with me. I'm on Facebook. My email is rstuller@snet.net, and I could give people the materials to do some petitioning. The more we spread the job around, the less daunting it is.
Yep.
And we don't know what's going to happen with the Democratic election. I know there are a lot of Sanders supporters who are unenthusiastic about any other major party candidate. And I would like to have a Green Party candidate on the ballot in Connecticut come November.
A lot of Sanders supporters, particularly the younger supporters, where he's representing about 85% of people under
Right.
30 years of age, are saying they're not going to vote for Hillary Clinton, even if Senator Sanders should endorse her candidacy, which means that it's an opportunity for Jill Stein to pick up those voters.
Right.
And it would be very significant if she got a lot of votes here in the state of Connecticut in terms of her candidacy, but also future Green Party candidates, and just a nice pat on the back of the Green Party in general.
And options are good. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm trying to convince Sanders supporters that they shouldn't write him in if he isn't on the ballot, because those votes are not counted. And so thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Ronna. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, it's nice to talk to you. Next week we are moving to 8:00 p.m. Cindy Barry will be on the show, and she's going to talk about what's new with New London's Field of Greens Farmers Market this year. So thank you again, Scott.
You're welcome.
3, 4.